You wake up to the distant sound of water sloshing. Not crashing waves or the gentle trickle of a mountain spring. No, this is more of a squelch. Like a boot full of oatmeal being stomped on in slow motion. Over and over. And that's not your imagination, that's the sound of your job. Your job is the sound. Welcome to your thrilling career as a medieval mill worker. It's roughly 1327, give or take a century. And you, dear friend, are about to experience the blisteringly beige reality of one of the most overlooked cogs in the economic machine of feudal Europe. Your eyes open slowly. Your straw mattress crinkles underneath you like old hay soaked in sweat, which, surprise, is exactly what it is. You went to sleep itchy, and you've woken up itchier, your daily reminder that fleas and lice have not only unionized but are holding a labor strike against your hygiene. There's no toothpaste, no toothbrush, no shampoo. Your pillow smells like betrayal. And something else. Maybe cabbage. You're not sure. You sit up in your cot. If you're lucky, it's in a small wooden lean-to next to the mill. If you're slightly less lucky, it's a cot in the main milling building itself, surrounded by damp stone, piles of chaff, and the gentle lullaby of rats chewing through your future. One of them has stolen your last turnip. Again. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world, whether you're in bed in Belgium or trying to sleep on your lunch break in Brazil. Now, where were we? Yes, your miserable life. You stretch and your joints crack like firewood. You're 23 years old, which makes you roughly a senior citizen in mill worker terms. Your spine already hates you, your knees are one bad turn from giving up, and you haven't had a day off since you were 12. Because what are you going to do? Go on strike? Peasants don't strike. They just die, quietly and inconveniently, usually mid-task. The first thing you smell is mildew. The second is mold. The third is that one guy, Gerard, who never washes because he believes dirt keeps the spirits away. He is, to be fair, not wrong. No one wants to haunt a moon who smells like fermented goat. Your job? You work the mill. Or more accurately, the mill works you. And there are two kinds of mills in your world, the watermill and the windmill. Today, you've drawn the slightly better of the two, a watermill. Because when it's not freezing or flooding, it at least mostly runs on the power of flowing water and the never-ending disappointment of physics. The giant wooden wheel outside groans as the river pushes it, turning a series of gears inside the building, gears made of wood, iron, and spite, that, in turn, rotate heavy millstones. These stones are your bosses. They don't talk. They don't listen. They don't have dental. But they grind, in every sense of the word. You shuffle over to the main work area, your shoes half-rotted and soaked from last night's drizzle, which, you'll note, also drizzled directly onto your bed through a hole in the thatch. Your job today is flour. Again. Because that's mostly what a mill worker does, grind grain into flour. You know, flour. The white, dusty stuff that keeps nobles fat, bakers employed, and your lungs permanently coated in a fine layer of death. The process is simple. Someone, usually another peasant more miserable than you, which is saying something, brings sacks of barley, rye, or wheat. You drag the sacks, which weigh about the same as your dreams, over to the hopper, dump them in, and pray that the gears don't jam again. When they do, and they will, it's your job to stick your arm into the ancient wooden machinery of despair and jiggle things loose, all while praying that today is not the day you become Lefty the flour guy. If you're wondering how dangerous this is, yes, very. Medieval mills are essentially proto-industrial meat grinders run by unpaid interns with no formal education. They're made of damp wood, nails, rope, and confusion. Safety regulations don't exist. HR doesn't exist. If something goes wrong, your manager, who is also the miller, also the local tax collector, and also somehow married to your cousin, will just look at your broken arm and say, "You'll work faster with one." And the noise. Oh, the noise. The groaning of the wheel. The grinding of stone. The screaming of gears. The constant thump of the camshaft. It's like living inside a cranky grandfather clock with emotional problems. The sound never stops. It becomes your lullaby. Your nemesis. Your eternal soundtrack. You don't remember what silence sounds like anymore. Silence, for the record, smells better. But don't worry, it's not all bad. Occasionally, a noble will ride by on his fancy horse and throw you a copper for your efforts, which you can then spend on a single stale radish or, if you're feeling really reckless, a strip of dried eel skin from the traveling merchant who smells like old leather and regret. You're paid, if you're lucky, in bread and permission not to be beaten that week. Real cash is rare. Most of the time, your payment is that the miller lets you keep a bit of the flour you help produce. You take it home, try to make porridge, and wonder when the last time was that you had a tooth. And yes, you live in fear. Of floods that break the wheel. Of droughts that stop the water. Of fire. Because everything is made of wood, including the building, the wheel, the roof, and your sense of hope. You also live in fear of the lord of the manor deciding that you're skimming too much flour and having you flogged for theft, even though it's your body breaking down to produce his profits. Capitalism's humble origins. Let's take a moment to talk about millers. Not mill workers. Millers. That's the guy who runs the mill, owns the place, and profits off your labor. He is, by medieval standards, basically Elon Musk. Except dirtier. And way more smug. He wears better clothes than you, possibly dyed with actual color, a huge flex, and gets to sit on a wooden chair while you stand for 14 hours, straight inhaling dust. Millers are also famously corrupt. Everyone knows it. Even the church knows it. There are actual laws passed to stop millers from cheating customers by keeping too much flour. Do those laws work? Of course not. The miller just bribes the local reeve, who's also his cousin's brother's uncle or something. Everyone's related. It's weird. Don't think too hard about it. You're interrupted by the sack boy, a 10-year-old with the eyes of someone who's seen too much grain and not enough sunlight. He drops a fresh sack at your feet, wheezes dramatically, and walks off to get another. You think about telling him to run while he's still young. But he's already missing a toe, and possibly his will to live. Meanwhile, your hands are raw. The rope that lifts the sacks into the hopper has splinters the size of cocktail swords. Your fingers are cracked and bleeding. You think about gloves. Then you remember gloves haven't been invented yet for people like you. Nobles have gloves. You have shame and a splinter collection. Around midday, you get your break. Sort of. You sit on a barrel and chew something vaguely resembling bread. It's more like a limestone tile with ambition. Hard, stale, and with mysterious gray specks. You think it's flour. You hope it's flour. You chew. And chew. And chew. Somewhere in the distance, a tooth cries out in pain. A small rat joins you for lunch. You name him Alfred. You don't have many friends. Let's not forget the weather. If it rains, your job continues. If it snows, it still continues. The mill doesn't stop because you're cold. You stop. You freeze. And the miller gives your job to someone younger and with more toes. You're replaceable. Everyone is. Except the millstones. They're the real stars of this operation. Massive, ancient, expensive. They need to be redressed regularly, a term which sounds elegant but really just means someone, you, chiseling grooves into them while coughing up bits of lung. Sometimes the mill floods. That's exciting. It means panic, emergency repairs, and possibly drowning. You get to wade into freezing water up to your waist, trying to pull sticks and river gunk out of the wheel mechanism while the current tries to take you to an early grave. It's like a spa day, except instead of cucumber water, you get hypothermia. On Sundays, you don't mill. You go to church. Not because you're pious, but because if you don't, the priest reports you and you're fined a month's worth of porridge. You sit, frozen, through a sermon in Latin, which you don't understand, while the priest drones on about sin. You reflect on your week, and wonder if having impure thoughts about escaping this village with a traveling juggler counts as damnation. Spoiler, it does. At night, you stumble back to your bed. You're covered in flour, mud, and emotional damage. You lie down. The rats are already sleeping on your pillow. You consider moving them. Then you remember they bite. So you sleep next to them. They're warm, at least. And as you drift off, you dream not of castles or glory, but of socks. Clean, dry socks. Something you've never had. Something you probably never will. Sweet dreams. You wake up to the sound of wheezing. Not your own this time, though you are wheezing, but the creaking wheeze of the mill will outside turning just slightly off kilter. Again, that's the sound of maintenance that hasn't happened since the last plague rolled through. Which, fun fact, you survived. Hooray! You're one of the lucky ones. Your reward? An extra shift and twice the rat poop in your flour bin. Your shirt, which is technically a potato sack with dreams, clings to your skin, stiff with yesterday's sweat. You peel it off your chest like a second, crunchy epidermis and force yourself upright. Your spine makes a sound like a tree branch breaking under snow, and your knees immediately file for early retirement. You ignore both. You have to. Pain is your most consistent coworker. Outside, it's still dark. Because in the 14th century, daylight savings is just a phrase that doesn't exist, and the sun gets up when it feels like it. You work from can't see to can't see, which is another way of saying, your shift is longer than your lifespan. You start the day by checking the mill's sluice gate, a term that sounds vaguely magical, but really it's just a wooden hatch you shove with a stick to direct water toward the mill wheel. It leaks. Everything leaks. Your boots leak. Your walls leak. Your optimism leaks. The sluice, however, leaks aggressively, which means you're losing power and will probably be yelled at by the miller for stealing his energy. Yes, he says that. He thinks he invented hydropower. He once called himself the River Lord. Nobody stopped him. Everyone regrets this. Your job today, again, is flour. Because it is always flour. You live in flour. You breathe flour. You sneeze flour. You've become flour. There's no HR department to talk to about your growing suspicion that your lungs are now 40% gluten. You just accept it. Like the plague. And indigestion. You head to the grain sacks, each one a thrilling mystery. Is it full of barley? Oats? Mice? You never know. You open one to find it writhing with small black beetles. You sigh, shake the beetles out, and dump the grain into the hopper anyway. You think about how nobles eat soft white bread, while your bread crunches like a mouthful of broken promises and exoskeletons. You do not get paid enough to care. Let's talk about payment again, because that's always a fun, existential exercise. On paper, you work for a wage. In reality, you work for a percentage of what's called the miller's toll, the portion of grain or flour that the miller legally gets to keep as payment for milling. You get a sliver of that toll. The miller keeps the rest. His wife takes what she wants, and by the time your turn comes, your payment fits in a squirrel's lunchbox. It's fine. You weren't planning on eating this week anyway. Around you, the millstones turn, grinding and shrieking like they're auditioning for a medieval metal band. The dust rises again, clinging to your eyelashes and eyebrows, coating your tongue. You can taste every batch. This one has notes of mildew, sadness, and oat. You call it peasant vintage. Someone shouts from outside. You glance through a cracked wooden shutter and spot a line of villagers waiting for their grain to be processed. They don't look happy. They never do. Some are angry because the wait is long. Others are angry because the miller is cheating them. A few are just angry in general. That's life here. You get born, you suffer, you pay a flour tax, and then you die of a cough. Let's take a moment to appreciate the technology around you. Yes, medieval milling is, technically, high-tech. The system of gears, cogs, and shafts powered by water is astonishing for the time. It's all handmade, hand-assembled, hand-maintained. And you know what else? It breaks constantly. The axle warps. The cogs splinter. The stones wear down. When something jams, which happens every third Tuesday, give or take, the whole system shudders to a halt and someone has to crawl under the mechanism and yell at it until it behaves. That someone is you. You duck under the grinding platform. It's dark. It's damp. It smells like wet wood and generational trauma. You reach up and feel around the gear housing. A stick is jammed in the teeth. How? You don't know. Maybe the rats have started a revolution. You pull it out, narrowly avoid losing a finger, and crawl back out covered in grease, flour, and your own anxiety. The miller wanders in just in time to take credit. He's wearing a tunic that's only slightly moldy, and he smells like garlic and pride. He nods at the now working mill, grunts good lad, and walks off to complain about how nobody works hard anymore. You watch him go, wondering how much of his job is just growing a beard and looking stern. The thing is, despite the daily misery, milling is weirdly important. In a world without supermarkets, milling is how food happens. No mill, no bread. No bread, no peasants. No peasants, no taxes. You're essentially the glue holding feudal society together. You and several dozen rodents. Congratulations. You are the backbone of the economy and nobody appreciates you. Except maybe the cats. The cats love you. You are the god of vermin. They follow you, hang out by the grain bins, nap in the flower piles. One sits on a beam above your head. His name is probably Sir Whiskers of Mange. He judges you silently while licking flour off his paws. By mid-morning, your back is on fire. The sacks have multiplied. There are more villagers now. A nun with one eye. A shepherd who smells like boiled goat. An old woman who throws a potato at you when you say she has to wait. You dodge the potato. It hits the sack boy instead. He goes down like a bag of flour. Irony. Lunch comes and goes. You don't eat. You just drink water, gritty, questionable water, from a cracked wooden cup. It tastes like moss and possibly shoes. You ignore it. Hydration is hydration. At one point, someone brings in chestnut flour. You hate chestnut flour. It gums up the stones, smells like feet, and tastes like bitter regret. You process it anyway. You're nothing if not professional. By now, your hands are permanently dusted white. You become a ghost. Not metaphorically. The local children actually refer to you as the Paleman. And then, excitement. One of the belts snaps. It whips across the room like a medieval whip of doom, cracks a beam, and unbalances one of the hopper bins. Grain spills everywhere. You leap to save what you can. Not because of the grain. Because of the miller's wrath. He once hit a mun with a chicken for spilling barley. You do not want to be the next poultry casualty. Cleanup takes an hour. You sweep, scoop, and shovel. You try not to think about how much of the spilled grain is now contaminated with dirt, bugs, and at least one dead mouse. You scoop it anyway. Waste not, want not. Also, your job depends on it. By late afternoon, your body has stopped sending pain signals, either because you've transcended suffering or because your nerves have unionized and gone on strike. Either way, you press on. A delivery arrives, 10 more sacks. You feel your soul leave your body, look at you from across the room, and shake its head in disappointment. You dream, briefly, of another life. Maybe as a monk. They get cloisters and silence and wine. Or maybe as a traveling juggler. No heavy lifting. Just mild humiliation. Or maybe, wild thought, as a miller. Then you remember the beard, the greed, the smugness. No thanks. As evening falls, the sun casts golden light through the slats in the wall, turning the dust in the air into a swirling, glittering cloud. It would be beautiful if it wasn't also choking you. You cough. The dust coughs back. You call it a draw. The last sack is finally milled. You haul the flour into storage, stack the sacks, and close the wooden shutters. The wheel outside is still turning. It never really stops. You think about that sometimes. How the mill turns and turns long after the people running it have stopped. Like time. Or taxes. You walk home, if it can be called home. It's more of a glorified box with a hole in the roof and a door that creaks louder than your knees. Inside, it's dark and cold. Your blanket is a flattened grain sack. You lie down, every part of you sore. You close your eyes. You don't dream anymore. Just static. The quiet, grinding static of a life spent turning other people's grain into bread you'll never eat. And tomorrow, you'll do it all again. Sleep tight. You wake up to the sound of rain. Not a gentle, poetic drizzle, but a full medieval downpour, the kind that turns roads into rivers and roofs into regrets. You hear it slapping the thatch above you with the same force and rhythm as a drunk blacksmith pounding on a church bell at 3 a.m. With each thunderous splash, a new leak springs to life somewhere in your one-room hut. The drips are forming a small choir, alto in the corner, tenor by your foot, and a surprise baritone right above your face. Your blanket is damp. Your floor is mud. Your ceiling is losing the will to live. You sit up and immediately sneeze, launching a cloud of flour dust that's still clinging to your hair from yesterday. Or maybe it's from the day before. Hard to tell. Hygiene, as you may have noticed, is more of a concept than a practice here. Baths are something nobles do once per feast season, usually to impress each other or confuse the lice. You haven't been near hot water since the time the bakery accidentally caught fire and you stood too close to the bread oven. But at least the lice are loyal. Your scalp is like a bustling urban center for parasitic tourism. You name a few. Jeffrey, Beatrice, Little Rat Timmy. You give them space. They've earned it. You're not just a mill worker. You're an ecosystem. You slip into your work tunic, still crusted with yesterday's flour, sweat, and existential defeat, and prepare for another enchanting day at the mill. Your shoes are as wet on the inside as they are on the outside. You put them on anyway. No one in the village owns a second pair of shoes. That's called wealth. You are not afflicted with that problem. The path to the mill is now a muddy slip-and-slide. Your feet sink with each step, squelching like sad, damp pancakes. You pass the same landmarks as always, a half-collapsed fence that's been threatening to fully collapse for 3 generations, a communal dung heap that's steaming in the rain like it has ambitions to become a volcano, and a chicken that may or may not be immortal. Nobody remembers when it arrived. It just watches. As you approach the mill, the sound of rushing water greets you, louder than usual. That's either a good sign or a terrible one. You round a corner and, yes, terrible. The river is swollen and angry, like it just read a bad Yelp review of the feudal system. The water wheel is spinning wildly, groaning under the strain. The mill itself creaks ominously, like a ship caught in a storm, which, honestly, it kind of is, just with more splinters and fewer pirates. Inside, the miller is panicking in his own special way, pacing back and forth muttering about divine punishment and grain quotas. His wife is shouting something about sandbags. The apprentice boy is trying to catch a chicken that wandered in during the chaos. It's unclear why. The chicken seems perfectly calm. It may, in fact, be in charge now. You immediately get to work because what else are you going to do? Not work? That's adorable. You shove a few sacks of grain up onto a high shelf, mostly to keep them from floating away. You wedge a broken beam back into place with your shoulder and hold it there while the miller ties it off with what can only be described as a very ambitious shoelace. All around you, the sounds of panic blend into the usual symphony of grindstone shrieks, wooden groans, and flour dust sneezes. You could compose a whole Gregorian chant about it. Call it Dies Illa Esse Sassorum, which roughly translates to that day of sacks. Let's talk about sacks for a moment. You hate sacks. You move them, lift them, carry them, dump them, and then do it again. Each one weighs more than your hopes and dreams combined. They're made of rough burlap, which leaves your arms scratched up like you've been fighting angry hedgehogs. They never stack right. They always fall over. One of them might be sentient. You're too tired to care. The miller, in a fit of misguided optimism, decides that this is the perfect time to process double the usual grain load. Strike while the wheel is strong, he says, while casually stepping over a small flood forming near the main shaft. You look at him and wonder what it's like to live in that kind of reality, the kind where water, stress, and gravity don't apply to you. And so the wheel spins faster. The stones grind harder. The gears scream louder. You feed grain into the hopper like you're trying to appease some ancient flower god. The dust is thicker now, clinging to your eyelashes, lining your lungs. You cough, and it comes out looking like a poorly sifted pancake mix. Eventually, the inevitable happens. A jam. The worst kind. You hear the pitch of the grindstone change, from angry beast to dying whale. Something has wedged itself between the stones. Probably a rock. Possibly a rat. You shut everything down before it explodes. The shutdown process is not delicate. You yank a lever, shout something vaguely blasphemous, and kick a wooden brace that doesn't deserve it, but was unfortunately nearby. The entire mill shudders, groans, and comes to a halt. Silence. Well, not silence. Rain, dripping, creaking, muttering from the miller. But mill silence. It's unnerving. You crouch down and start disassembling the hopper assembly. You find the blockage, a stone the size of a sad apple. You pry it out, marveling at how something so small can derail something so big. Like nobles. Or fleas. Or misplaced ambition. As you reassemble the gears, your fingers bleed slightly. You notice, wipe them on your tunic, and move on. Blood is just body oil with drama. It's part of the job. Hours pass in a blur of repetition. Grain in, flour out. Sacks moved, sneezes sneezed. At some point, someone brings bread as payment for their milling. The loaf is dense enough to break windows. You consider eating it anyway. Hunger overrules caution. You take a bite. It tastes like flour, mold, and possibly despair. But it's warm. That makes it almost luxurious. By late afternoon, the rain eases up. The river calms. The wheel slows to a manageable pace. The miller finally stops pacing and makes himself a cup of hot gruel, which he drinks like it's fine wine. He doesn't offer you any. Of course not. You're just the one who saved his mill from becoming medieval Atlantis. There's a knock at the door. A tax collector. Wonderful. He's here for the grain tithe, which is exactly what it sounds like, the portion of everyone's grain that goes to the local lord. You hate him instantly. He wears a hat that's far too clean and a smile that suggests he's never had to dig flour out of his armpit. The miller hands over a few sacks of flour, smiles, and then subtly gestures toward you, as if to say, "Look, I keep peasants." The taxman nods approvingly and leaves. You feel like a furniture piece that just got inspected. Or a goat. Possibly both. You go outside to breathe fresh air, though in this case fresh means slightly less damp than inside. You sit on a rock, stare at the clouds, and contemplate your life. You could have been a cobbler, or a field hand, or a traveling minstrel with one good song and a lute that smells like sadness. Instead, you're here, grinding, always grinding. And yet, there's something oddly peaceful about it. The wheel turns. The grain flows. The rhythm continues. You're part of something bigger. Not something glamorous. Not something that'll be remembered in books. But something essential. People eat because you exist. Bread rises because you broke your back for it. That's almost poetic. In a tragic, dusty sort of way. Evening falls again. You head home, your muscles screaming. Your tunic is soaked. Your hands are raw. But the mill is still standing. The grain got milled. And tomorrow, the wheel will turn again. You fall into your bed, if we're still calling it that, and exhale a cloud of flour that was hiding in your beard. You close your eyes. You don't dream. Not because you're too tired, but because dreams would require mental energy, and you donated all of yours to the flour gods. Good night, mill worker. You've survived another day. You wake up to the smell of smoke. Not the comforting, rustic kind that drifts from a distant chimney like a storybook promise. No. This is acrid, intrusive smoke. Smoke that suggests something important is on fire. Possibly the latrine. Hopefully not the mill. You sit up, wheezing slightly, and take inventory of your immediate environment. Mattress? Still stuffed with straw and regret. Blanket? Still damp, now with a new smoky top note. Ceiling? Still structurally questionable. But your lungs are working, your fingers are attached, and no rats are visibly nesting in your hair. So we're calling that a win. Outside, the smoke turns out to be coming from the baker's oven, again. Apparently, someone tried to bake bread at dawn and fell asleep. Now the village smells like burnt ambition and fermented yeast. You nod solemnly and keep walking. Fire is everyone's problem, but also somehow never your job. The path to the mill is less muddy this morning, thanks to the rainstorm finally retiring overnight. The sky is gray, the birds are shrieking like tiny winged demons, and your knees are grinding like the millstones themselves. Today, your joints will be filing an official complaint with the church, citing inhumane conditions and early onset arthritis. As you approach the mill, the wheel is already in motion. That's either impressive or suspicious, depending on who started it. Inside, the apprentice boy is trying to look busy, but he's clearly just been poking the sack of oats and pretending it's a noble's face. You relate. You get to work without a word. Because what are you going to say? Good morning? No such thing. Morning is an ambush. You grab the first sack of grain, which feels heavier than your entire sense of purpose, and start feeding it into the hopper. The grindstone begins its familiar groan. Like it, too, didn't get enough sleep. Let's talk about that grindstone, shall we? It's a beast, two circular stones stacked together, one rotating atop the other. Each is roughly the size of a small table and weighs more than your average ox with low self-esteem. The top stone, the runner, rotates. The bottom one, the bedstone, stays still, which, honestly, is the job you want. Now, the grain goes into a wooden funnel called a hopper. Gravity does the rest, pulling the kernels down between the stones where they are ruthlessly crushed into flour, just like your dreams when you first realized you were destined to work here forever. The process is elegant in theory, but messy in practice. Grain clogs, stones slip, wood creaks, and sometimes the entire mechanism decides it's had enough and simply stops. At which point, you, the human Band-Aid, must crawl inside the mill like a 13th century mechanic and figure out why everything suddenly hates you. Today, it's actually running well. Suspiciously well. The stones hum in a rhythm almost pleasant. The hopper is feeding steadily. You feel vaguely productive. This concerns you deeply. Productivity often precedes disaster. As if summoned by your unease, the miller walks in. "Morning," he says, which is already too much. He informs you that a special guest will be arriving today. A noble. From the manor. Someone important. Your stomach sinks. Nobles are like stinging insects, shiny, decorative, and mostly useless, but highly dangerous when provoked. You start mentally preparing for a day of excessive bowing and pretending to care about embroidery. Now would be a good time to mention that the nobility do not understand how the mill works. They think the flour appears by magic, or perhaps by divine will. They imagine the wheel spins serenely while angels flutter around and sing about barley yields. What they do not imagine, ever, is you, covered in flour, snot, and sawdust, furiously cranking levers and swearing at mice. So before you get comfortable or nobly offended, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you're genuinely into this weird mix of dry humor and medieval dust allergies. And hey, drop a comment to let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. It's always weirdly fascinating to see who else is staring at flour clouds at 2 a.m. Back to the impending visit. The miller tells you to clean everything. The stones, the gears, the sacks, even the walls. You're about to spend your day dusting a place that literally creates dust for a living. It's like trying to dry the ocean with a ladle. You fetch a broom. It's more stick than bristle. It might have once been a tree. You start sweeping the floor, raising clouds of flour that instantly settle back where they started. You wipe down the stone casing, smear more grime than you remove, and step outside to shake out a sack, only to be slapped in the face by the wind with your own dirt. Nature has no respect for your efforts. Then he arrives. The noble. He's wearing shoes made of leather so soft it looks like butter. His cloak is embroidered with gold thread that probably costs more than the mill itself. His expression says, "I've never touched anything unpleasant in my life, and I'd like to keep it that way." He's followed by two servants whose only job appears to be nodding. "Ah," he says, stepping delicately inside and immediately wrinkling his nose. "Smells rustic." You resist the urge to throw a sack of millet at him. The miller bows. You attempt something resembling a bow, but mostly just do a controlled fall forward and call it good. The noble walks around, poking at things, asking questions like, "How do you keep the flour white? And do the peasants grind it by hand when the wheel breaks?" You want to say, "Yes, with our teeth," but you don't. Instead, the miller does the talking. He explains the process using words like fine product and dependable labor, while occasionally gesturing vaguely toward you, like you're a tool he found near the water wheel. The noble nods sagely and says something about quotas. Then he starts talking about taxation. Then he leaves. Just like that. The entire visit lasts 14 minutes, and 3 of those were spent discussing how hard it is to find good goose liver this season. You sigh deeply and go back to work. Afternoon drags on. You process more grain. Someone brings barley this time, which produces a flour that smells vaguely nutty and entirely like horse feed. A sack bursts. You sweep. Another sack bursts. You consider screaming, but your voice gave up sometime last Tuesday. By the time the sun starts to set, the miller is counting coins, the ones paid in flour, which he'll trade at market. You are counting blisters. Then comes the rat. It scurries out from beneath the gears like it owns the place. You both freeze. It stares at you. You stare at it. Mutual respect. You don't even chase it. You just nod and move on. It's had a long day too. You finally drag yourself home after dark, shoes soaked from a puddle you didn't see. Your knees ache. Your fingers feel like someone replaced them with splintery twigs. You lie down. Your mattress welcomes you back with its usual bouquet of mildew and betrayal. Sleep comes slowly. Your muscles twitch. Your ears ring with the ghostly echo of the grindstone. You think, briefly, about leaving it all behind. Running away. Becoming a traveling fool, or a hedge priest, or a pirate with a mild wheat allergy. But you don't. Because tomorrow, the wheel turns again. And you'll be there. Dusty, tired, underpaid, and absolutely necessary. Good night, mill worker. Rest while you can. You wake up to the sound of screaming. Not the thrilling kind, like a bard getting bitten by a goose during a love ballad. No, this is full-throated, high-pitched, panicked village screaming, which only means one thing: either the Lord's tax mule has escaped again or someone's fallen into the mill race. Spoiler, it's the second one. You sit up, blink flour out of your eyelashes, and shove the corner of your scratchy blanket off your face. Your bed is, as usual, a contradiction. Somehow both cold and sweaty, flat and lumpy, supportive like a father who left for the Crusades and never returned. Outside, the chaos is already underway. A group of villagers has gathered near the water channel that feeds the mill wheel. There's shouting, frantic pointing, and someone wading thigh-deep through the muck, all while holding a bucket like it's going to fix anything. You recognize the unfortunate soul in the water. It's the apprentice boy. Again. He's soaked, shivering, and wearing one shoe. You're not sure where the other went, probably taken by the river as payment for his stupidity. Apparently, he slipped while trying to clear debris. Translation: he was poking the water with a stick and forgot about gravity. The miller is screaming too, because that's his primary method of communication. He's shouting about the wheel stalling, lost productivity, and something about the wrath of St. Arnulf, which feels overly dramatic even by his standards. Eventually, the boy is hauled out, the wheel is cleared, and your workday begins, slightly wetter than usual, but no less miserable. You step inside the mill and are immediately greeted by your old friend, dust. It's in the air, on the beams, inside your mouth, under your eyelids. It's somehow heavier today, like it knows you're tired and wants to smother you out of mercy. You roll up your sleeves, which are already rolled up because you only own 2 tunics, and both of them are essentially armholes sewn into burlap. Your first job of the day is cleaning the mill race grating. Again. A delightful task that involves bending over a filthy channel of water, scooping out rotting leaves, sticks, and the occasional unfortunate amphibian. While you're at it, you contemplate your life. Not in a grand philosophical way. Just in a "why is this frog staring at me like it knows my secrets" kind of way. Back inside, the gears are jammed. Again. The great wooden teeth that drive the power from the wheel to the grindstones have been doing their job for years, mostly through a combination of friction, prayer, and occasional bribes to the carpenter. But today, one of them has cracked. That means downtime. Which means someone, you, gets to fix it. With tools that might as well be sticks and rocks. You wedge yourself into the tight space behind the gear housing and begin the delicate process of medieval repair, smacking things with a mallet until they reluctantly function. You curse softly under your breath. Not loudly. The beams might hear and take offense. So before you settle in to witness this emotional and mechanical breakdown, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if this historical train wreck of flour and despair is your kind of soothing bedtime story. And do let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. Bonus points if it's somewhere dramatically inappropriate, like a board meeting or your ex's wedding. Eventually, the gears creak back into motion. You wipe sweat from your forehead using the least dirty part of your sleeve, which is relative, because everything you own now qualifies as a biohazard. You head over to the hopper and begin feeding the grain, and the cycle begins anew. Let's talk about your diet for a moment. It's consistent. Every day, you eat some form of barley. Barley porridge. Barley bread. Occasionally, barley that's just been soaked in water and optimistically called stew. Protein is rare. Cheese is a rumor. Vegetables are an accident. Your entire nutritional profile is shaped like a wedge of sadness. Flour itself is everywhere, but not really for eating, not directly, anyway. You mill it for others, who then use it to make the food they get paid in. You might get a crust if someone forgets to collect it. Yesterday, you found a heel of bread under a sack. It was crunchy. On the inside. Now, In case you're thinking, but surely you must get paid? Let's clarify. You receive payment in the same way a tree receives sunlight. You don't notice it. You can't trade it for anything. And if something blocks it, you just sort of quietly die. Money? That's for merchants and lords. You get scraps, leftovers, maybe a chicken if it's laying badly and someone's feeling generous. Most of what you own is either inherited, bartered for, or simply never cleaned until it doesn't matter anymore. At midday, a merchant arrives. He's well-fed, well-dressed, and smells faintly of cloves, which means he's from somewhere else. Somewhere that has spices. He's here to collect a special order of rye flour for a festival in town. You lift the sack yourself. He watches you like lifting is some exotic peasant dance, and then offers the miller a coin. Just one. A single silver coin for a week of back-breaking labor. The miller accepts it like he's being knighted. You don't even get an odd. After the merchant leaves, the miller generously offers you an extra slice of dried apple. It tastes like disappointment, but sweet. Later that afternoon, the village priest stops by. He doesn't want flour. He wants gossip. He brings holy water and a jug of weak ale, which is really just unholy water with dreams. He walks around pretending to bless the gear shaft while actually just sniffing around for scandal. Any signs of demonic influence, he asks, eyeing the grindstone like it might start speaking Latin. You want to say, if the devil is in this building, he's underpaid and exhausted. But you nod and say something pious instead. He nods back, blesses a beam that's already cracked in 3 places, and leaves you to your sanctified suffering. Eventually, evening comes. Your hands are numb. Your back is a tangle of knots and regrets. The wheel slows to its evening crawl. You sweep up the flour, as if it matters. The apprentice boy accidentally spills a bucket of bran down a drain. He cries. You consider joining him. You leave the mill in darkness. The sky is heavy with stars and the promise of another equally disappointing tomorrow. You pass the same chicken. It stares. You don't question it anymore. You've accepted that the chicken is immortal and possibly your god now. At home, your neighbor is arguing with her husband about who forgot to feed the pig. The pig is standing in the doorway, judging them both. You smile, step over the pig, and collapse into bed. You dream of a world where flour doesn't exist. It's just water and air. Nobody eats. Nobody mills. Everyone is clean. And then someone sneezes and the dream explodes in a cloud of white dust. Good night, mill worker. Rest your bones. Tomorrow, the grain will come again. And the wheel? The wheel always turns. You wake up with the taste of flour in your mouth. Not in a poetic, bread is life kind of way. No. This is actual raw flour, probably inhaled overnight, coating your tongue like the grimy fingerprints of every terrible decision that brought you here. You cough. A puff of white dust exits your mouth. You are, in all meaningful ways, a pastry that never made it to the oven. The sun isn't even up yet. Of course it isn't. Because the sun respects itself. You, on the other hand, are expected to be upright, alert, and full of energy by the time the sky reluctantly agrees to lighten. You swing your legs over the side of your bed and immediately regret being alive. Your knees sound like someone stepping on a handful of dry twigs. Your back feels like you've been used as a bridge for oxen. You throw on your clothes, which is generous phrasing for what you're doing. It's more like wrapping yourself in the ghosts of previous Tuesdays. Your tunic is stiff from dried sweat. Your hose are somewhere between damp and mildewed. You find one boot under the bed, the other hanging from the window ledge. You don't question it. That's a tomorrow problem. Outside, the air is cold and aggressively wet. Not raining, just oppressively moist. The kind of weather that feels like it's trying to soak into your soul. Your walk to the mill is quiet except for the squelching of your boots and the occasional crow cackling like it knows your life is a joke. The mill is silent when you arrive, which is never a good sign. You push open the creaking door to find the miller asleep in his chair, mouth open, snoring like a dying donkey. There's a mostly empty tankard on the floor beside him and a loaf of bread that looks like it was partially eaten by shame. You consider waking him. Then you remember last week when you tried that and got elbowed in the ribs so hard you saw 3 popes. So instead, you start your morning routine. Sweep the flour off the floor. Shake the bags. Clear the chute. Remove the squirrel from the gear shaft. You sigh. Every day, a new creature. At this point, You're considering charging rent. With the squirrel safely relocated and only mildly offended, you finally get the wheel turning. It groans to life like it's angry at being alive. Again, relatable. Today's grain is spelt. It's supposed to be a luxury flour, slightly finer, a bit nuttier. You're told it's healthier, though no one really knows what that means in a society where people die from soup. You pour the grain into the hopper and it flows slowly, rhythmically, hypnotically. And in that moment, with the steady clack of the wheel, the soft grinding of stone, and the scent of warm grain filling the air, you almost feel at peace. So before we completely lose ourselves in this rare moment of medieval serenity, take a second to like the video and subscribe if this tragic blend of sarcasm, suffering, and spelt has earned a permanent spot in your insomniac heart. And hey, drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is. Seriously, it's weirdly comforting to know who else is zoning out to peasant misery at 3:17 a.m. Now, back to the suffering. Because the peace? It never lasts. The miller wakes up with a snort and immediately begins issuing orders. He wants the back storeroom reorganized. Again. Why? No reason. He just likes moving sacks around until someone herniates. You brace yourself for the joy of hoisting 100-pound bags filled with powdered sadness. The storeroom smells like damp grain and despair. Every sack is half-labeled, half-torn, and fully angry. You lift, you shift, you twist, and something in your spine makes a sound that should probably be reported to a priest. By the time you're halfway done, your arms feel like wet noodles and your shirt is clinging to your back in ways that violate basic human dignity. Halfway through the job, the village baker shows up. He's cheerful, which is offensive. "Beautiful day," he says, covered in soot and optimism. You consider flinging a bag of bran at him, but you lack the energy and the bail money. He's here to collect flour for the daily bread. And because the bread feeds the village and the priest and the tax collector and basically every person who outranks you, which is all of them, this is priority number one. You help load the sacks onto his cart. Your muscles scream. He thanks you with half a dried figure. You eat it anyway. Later, a woman arrives with a complaint. Her last sack of flour had weevils. She's very upset. She insists you must have done something wrong. You smile politely while imagining setting the entire mill on fire and moving to Wales. You offer to replace the sack. She insists on watching you do it, which means carefully measuring out the flour while she glares at you like a nun who's just caught you stealing communion wine. Eventually, she leaves, grumbling about standards. You return to work, a little more dead inside. At midday, you take a break. Not because anyone gives you one. You just slowly collapse onto a sack of oats and pretend it's part of your duties. You chew on a crust of bread, so hard it could qualify as a weapon, and stare at a spider making a web in the corner of the ceiling. It's the only creature here with job satisfaction. Suddenly, thunder. A storm is rolling in. You hear it before you see it. The low growl, the distant hiss of wind. Then the sky goes dark, like someone snuffed the sun out with a wet cloth. Rain comes fast and sideways. The river swells. You run to check the mill race. It's rising. Fast. Now comes the fun part, flood protocol. Which basically means panic. You and the apprentice, who is somehow even wetter than the rain, rush to open the sluice gate. You're ankle-deep in freezing water, pulling at a lever that hasn't been oiled since the last famine. It finally gives way with a screech and a splash. Water diverts. You sigh with relief. The wheel slows, but it won't snap off its axle. Today, back inside, everything is soaked. You, the grain sacks, the floor, the walls. The flour is beginning to clump. You shovel it into barrels and hope it doesn't mold before someone eats it or trades it for a pig. By evening, the storm is dying down. The mill is quiet again. You wring out your shirt. The miller has vanished. Probably home, probably dry, probably drinking the good ale. You finish sweeping the worst of the mud from the floor and step outside into a world that smells like wet hay and regret. On your way home, you pass a group of children chasing a goose. The goose is winning. The children scream. The goose screams louder. You nod at the goose, your feathered comrade in eternal frustration. Back at your shack, your straw bed is now damp. The ceiling is dripping. You lie down anyway. You pull the blanket over your head. It smells like old soup and lost innocence. You don't care. You're asleep in seconds. You dream of windmills, except they're powered by sarcasm and staffed by people who get paid in compliments. It's ridiculous. You're happy there. Good night, mill worker. Sleep while the rain sleeps too. Because tomorrow, someone's going to fall into the river again. You wake up to the sound of breathing. Not your own. Not a loved one. Not even the suspicious wheezing of the pig next door. No, this is the specific, nasal, judgmental breathing of your miller, who has taken it upon himself to stand over your bed like a disappointed ghost at an exorcism. You blink. He doesn't. He's holding a wooden paddle. You briefly wonder if you're about to be baptized or beaten. Then he speaks. There's been a theft. Ah, so neither. Just another regular Tuesday. You sit up, slowly, carefully, in case he decides to accuse you on principle. Your joints complain like choir boys forced to sing through a hangover. Your spine makes the sound of someone stepping on a stair that's already broken. You stand. He grunts. Then he leaves. The mystery of the missing flower awaits. You throw on your clothes, which have dried into a crisp, flour-encrusted second skin. They crackle when you move. You smell like moldy grain and resignation. You don't bother changing. What would you change into? Your backup tunic? The one with the inexplicable hole in the front and the bloodstain shaped like a duck? You arrive at the mill to find chaos. Or, rather, what passes for chaos in a medieval village, which is just slightly louder mediocrity. The storeroom door has been forced open, likely with a very determined stick, and 3 sacks of flour are gone. 3. That's more than your entire week's output. Which, if you're being honest, is almost impressive. The thief didn't just steal flour. They stole hope, and a decent amount of back pain. The miller is pacing in tight, angry circles, muttering about villainy and hanging, and someone's going to have their hands cut off. Mark my words. The apprentice is crying, mostly from stress, partially because he tried to touch a spiderweb and it fought back. You're just standing there, trying to look innocent while calculating how many chickens 3 sacks of flour would trade for. The answer, too many. As the investigation begins, which is really just everyone yelling and pointing at each other, let's take a moment to do something more relaxing, like liking this video, subscribing, and dropping a comment with your time and location. I know, it sounds basic, but honestly, if we're going to fall asleep together to the sound of powdered medieval trauma, we might as well get to know each other. Bonus points if you're watching this in a place where sleep is illegal, like a kindergarten or a bank. Anyway, the miller demands a search. Everyone is to turn out their homes, barns, and suspiciously large shoes. The priest is called. Again, he sniffs around for sin. Literally, he claims he can smell theft. You strongly suspect he just wants another excuse to be nosy and drink whatever ale people offer him out of fear. As the accusations fly and the mud is metaphorically and literally slung, you are, somehow, placed in charge of reorganizing the storage ledger. That's right. The mill has records. Kind of. The ledger is a piece of sheepskin with illegible ink scribbles and what appears to be a sketch of a pig in a hat. You sit down at the miller's bench, surrounded by the smell of old wood, spilt grain, and crushed dreams, and begin the thrilling work of decoding medieval bookkeeping. You quickly realize it's a mess. Sacks marked wheat are actually barley. Rye is labeled as possibly rye. One entry just says, "Don't trust the baker." Another one says, "Hiding place, don't tell wife." You piece together the truth as best you can. Flour has been going missing for weeks. Slowly. Quietly. Just enough here and there that no one noticed until now. This isn't theft. This is embezzlement. Or at least a 14th century equivalent, which is taking stuff when no one's looking and then acting surprised. You bring your findings to the miller, who listens with all the enthusiasm of a goat at a baptism. He narrows his eyes. "So you're saying it was the baker?" You shrug. You didn't say that. But if it gets you out of sweeping for an afternoon, sure. It was the baker. The miller storms off to confront him, leaving you alone with the mill, which is honestly the best part of your day. The grindstones are turning, the air is warm with the scent of fresh flour, and the only sounds are the rhythmic creak of gears and your own slow descent into existential despair. You take this rare moment of calm to do some real cleaning. You sweep the corners. You patch a small hole in the wall. You remove a dead mouse from inside the grain chute and whisper a prayer for its tiny, dusty soul. You even oil the axle, which is basically the medieval equivalent of a spa treatment. By the time the miller returns, red-faced and furious because the baker blamed the priest, you made the place almost habitable. He grunts in grudging approval. "It's clean," he says, as if that's a personal insult. You nod. "Yes, I know. It won't last." It never does. That evening, you get a visitor. A stranger, cloaked, mysterious. They don't say much. Just a nod, and a sack placed gently on the bench. You open it, flour. High quality, white, fine ground flour. Not yours. Not the mill's. Someone else's. They say nothing. Just disappear into the darkness. You stare at the sack, then out the door, then at your hands. And for the first time in a long time, you wonder if this life, this exhausting, grinding, flour-covered existence, is all there is. Is there another world out there? A place where mill workers sleep indoors, have 3 meals a day, and wear tunics with sleeves that match? You shake your head. Too dangerous to think like that. Safer to keep sweeping. Safer to stay poor and anonymous. No one expects rebellion from the man who spends his days elbow-deep in bran. Still, the flour remains. You hide it under a sack of barley and say nothing. That night, your dreams are strange. You're in a mill that never stops turning. The grindstone spins so fast it glows. The flour becomes smoke. The gears scream. And standing at the wheel is a figure with no face and hands made of sackcloth. You wake up sweating, but the sack is still there, and the wheel is still turning. Good night, mill worker. The mystery deepens. But tomorrow, someone's going to forget to latch the sluice gate and flood the storeroom with fish. So sleep while you can. You wake up to the sound of water. Again. Not the gentle, trickling kind of water. Not the pleasant babble of a stream that one might associate with peace, tranquility, or a scented candle. No, this is aggressive, fast, and wet in a way that strongly implies that something is very, very wrong. You sit up, and your feet squish into a puddle. Your straw bedding is soaked. Your blanket smells like a swamp married a goat. It's raining again. Has it ever not been raining? You open your door and are immediately greeted by what used to be a path, and is now a small river. Congratulations, you now live on waterfront property. You could sell this as a luxury Airbnb if it weren't for the aggressive smell of mildew and your neighbor's pig making direct eye contact while defecating in the water. You slosh your way to the mill, cursing softly and out loud. The mill is barely visible in the early morning fog, like some haunted relic rising from the mist. Which, if we're being honest, is exactly what it is. You hear the familiar creak of the water wheel, only it's not just creaking, it's screaming. A high-pitched metal-on-wood kind of shriek, the sound of something trying not to die. You run, which is really just glorified slipping, and arrive at the wheel to find that someone, Reed, the apprentice, forgot to lift the sluice gate overnight. The water level is now so high that it's pushing against the wheel like a drunk ox against a pub door. You brace your feet and try to lift the gate. It resists. Of course it resists. Everything resists in your life. Success, happiness, functional footwear. Why not a sluice gate too? Eventually, with the help of a large stick, 2 curse words, and a lot of upper body desperation, the gate shifts. A torrent of water blasts through, nearly taking your left boot with it. The wheel spins faster. Too fast. You shout. No one hears. Probably because no one wants to get involved with the smell of wet socks and broken dreams. Inside the mill, chaos. Again. The storeroom is flooded. Not deeply. Just enough to ruin everything important. The flour bags are sitting in 2 inches of water, soaking it up like the world's saddest sponge. You try to move them. They're now roughly the weight of a horse with depression. You give up and sit on a barrel that may or may not be floating. Your clothes are soaked, your hands are blistered, and the air smells like sour grain and your last nerve giving up the ghost. You know what would help in this moment? Liking the video, subscribing, leaving a comment with your time zone, and whether you're listening to this while fighting sleep, existential dread, or the sudden urge to abandon society and become marmot. It helps. Really. Let's suffer together. It's more fun that way. Back to the mill. The apprentice finally shows up around mid-morning, still yawning, hair sticking out at angles that defy God and geometry. You glare at him. He smiles. Busy morning? You fantasize about burying him under a sack of wet rye. Instead, you hand him a bucket and point at the water. He groans. You don't care. Misery loves company. Drenched company. While he bails, you try to assess the damage. Half the flour is ruined. The good spelt is clumped. The rye smells sour. You might be able to dry some of it in the sun, if the sun ever returns from whatever holiday it's on. At this point, you're beginning to believe the sun is a myth, like dry bread or dignity. The priest arrives around midday. Of course he does. He heard there was a flood and has come to pray for the water to retreat. What he actually does is stand in the doorway, mutter some Latin, and eat the last of your dried apples. He also declares the water is a sign of divine punishment. For what, exactly? Well, that's unclear. Probably for existing. The miller arrives shortly after. He takes one look at the disaster zone and makes a noise that sounds like a goat coughing. Then he shouts. Then he points. Then he leaves. Classic management. You and the apprentice spend the rest of the day dragging bags outside to dry, sweeping water back into the river, and trying to salvage what little can be saved. You lose one bag entirely. It bursts like a sad piñata, splattering doughy mush across the floor. You cry. Not visibly, but internally. Your soul sobs quietly in the background while your hands go through the motions of competence. By evening, the rain finally stops. The sun, or some pale approximation of it, peeks out from behind a cloud like a toddler testing boundaries. You sit by the wheel, your boots off, your feet in the mud, and you just exist. The wheel turns slowly now, steady, rhythmic, calming. For once, you close your eyes and listen. Water, wind, the faint creak of wood and rope, and silence. Real silence. No shouting, no sax falling, no apprentice humming off-key Gregorian chants while sweeping. Just the quiet breath of the world being slightly less awful for 5 minutes. In this moment, you think about other places, other jobs, anything that doesn't involve sacks, mold, and weather-related trauma. But you know the truth. You're a mill worker. You always will be. And it's not all bad. Sometimes there's fresh bread. Sometimes there's a kind smile from the baker's daughter. Sometimes there's a moment like this, where the world spins slow and nothing hurts, and you can almost forget that your boots smell like pickled socks. You head home after dark. The village is quiet. A few candles flicker in windows. Someone is playing a lute badly. The pig is asleep on someone's porch. You nod at it. It doesn't nod back. You crawl into your bed, now only mildly damp, and pull your blanket over you. The mattress squelches. You don't care. You drift off thinking about the stranger with the fine white flower. Who were they? Why did they come to you? Was it a gift? A test? A warning? You don't know. And you're too tired to care. Your dreams are peaceful. You're floating down a river of grain, gently carried by flower-filled currents. A goose is your captain. The moon is made of cheese. You smile in your sleep. Because tomorrow, the oven in the bakery will explode. And somehow, you'll be blamed. But for now, sleep. Sleep deep, mill worker. You've earned it. You wake up to the smell of burning. Not the cozy, firewood in a hearth kind. Not the romantic scent of smoke curling from a chimney. No. This is the sharp, acrid bite of panic. You bolt upright, immediately regretting it as your neck cracks like old kindling. Your eyes sting. Your lungs protest. You fling open the shutters, and there it is, a black column of smoke rising from the center of the village like an exclamation mark made of failure. The bakery is on fire. Of course it is. You throw on your boots, still damp from yesterday's accidental river adventure, and sprint out the door. Not that sprinting is easy, mind you. Your legs are sore from lifting waterlogged flour, your back is one bad sneeze away from giving up entirely, and your right boot squeaks like a rodent stuck in a squeeze box. When you arrive, the scene is pure medieval chaos. Villagers are running in circles. Someone is shouting that it's the devil's work. Someone else is trying to throw wine at the fire. The priest is holding a crucifix in one hand and a half-eaten bun in the other. You make your way through the crowd to find the baker on his knees, sobbing into a pile of scorched breadcrumbs. I just wanted a crustier crust, he wails. Is that such a sin? Apparently, yes. Yes, it is. The miller finds you, grabs your sleeve, and says the 4 words that strike terror into any mill worker's heart. We're out of flour. Of course we are. So before you even have a chance to decide whether you're a firefighter, a suspect, or just another bystander in this bread-based disaster, you are already being voluntold into cranking production into overtime. But before we dive back into your latest unpaid overtime shift, if you've made it this far, surviving the floods, the flour theft, and now the great bake-off that went horribly wrong, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Only if you're enjoying this medieval descent into culinary madness, of course. And drop a comment telling me what time it is where you are and what snack you wish you were eating. Because here, there's no snack, just soot. Anyway, the bakery fire has done more than ruin several loaves and possibly summon a demon. It's burned through nearly the entire flour supply for the village. What wasn't scorched was soaked by the haphazard attempts at fire suppression. Someone tried beer. It didn't work. It never does. The solution? Grind more. Faster. Non-stop. So you return to the mill. The grindstones are tired. The gears groan in protest. And the water wheel is missing a paddle. Probably because someone, again, likely the apprentice, thought it was a convenient bench and snapped it in half. You begin repairs. With what, you ask? Your dignity. And a plank you found leaning against the barn that probably belonged to a fence. You don't ask. It's better not to. By midday, you've cobbled the wheel back together. You're soaked in sweat, splinters, and what might be goose droppings. You look like you lost a fight with a woodpile and your own life choices. Grinding begins again. The sacks arrive in a parade of urgency. Farmers, nobles, and even a group of monks with very suspicious bags all show up at once, demanding priority. The noble steward claims his flour should come first because his lordship's morning bread cannot be delayed. You resist the urge to suggest his lordship try fasting. For a month. You weigh, you measure, you lift. Over and over. The stones grind endlessly, rhythmically, like the heartbeat of your exhaustion. Every handful of flour you produce disappears into a sack that isn't yours, going to a feast you'll never attend. You've developed a fine dusting of flour across your skin. You are now, officially, part pastry. As the day wears on, you notice something strange. One of the bags being dropped off is marked not with a name, but with a symbol, a circle with 3 diagonal slashes through it. The same mark you saw on the secret sack of high-quality flour a few days ago. You don't mention it. You just nod. Pretend not to notice. But the gears in your brain, slower than the ones in the mill, but more suspicious, begin to turn. Someone is smuggling, or trading, or laundering flour through your very hands. You could ask questions. You could investigate. But there's a line of shouting villagers demanding gluten, and you're too tired to care. You grind. You shovel. You listen to the endless sound of stone on stone. You start to hallucinate conversations with the grindstones. One of them tells you he used to be an accountant. When the sun begins to set, more a suggestion than a spectacle, thanks to the soot still lingering from the bakery inferno. You drag the last sack to the storeroom and collapse onto a barrel. You smell like work. You taste like grain. Your muscles feel like they were chewed on by an ox with trust issues. But the flour is flowing again. The village is fed. And the bakery, miraculously, is already rebuilding, because the baker's cousin is a stonemason who works exclusively for beer and compliments. The priest comes by again, offers a blessing of the grain, spits in your general direction, and leaves. You go home. The road is muddy. Your boots squish. When you reach your shack, there's something on your doorstep, a small loaf of bread. Not burned. Not moldy. Perfectly shaped. Still warm. No note. No explanation. Just a loaf. You stare at it like it's a message from another world. You pick it up. Bite into it. It's soft. Chewy. Salted. You cry. Just a little. Not enough to be dramatic. Just enough to remind yourself you're still human. That night, you sleep deeply. The dreams return. The flower river. The faceless figure. The spinning wheel in the sky. But this time, you're steering. And the goose salutes you. The work is endless. But so are you. Sleep tight, mill worker. Tomorrow, someone's going to accuse you of witchcraft. Because apparently, bread that good must be sorcery. You wake up to silence. Which frankly, is suspicious. Silence is not a natural state for your world. Your mornings are usually punctuated by some combination of roosters screaming, pigs fighting, apprentices breaking something valuable, or wind howling through the cracks in your wall like nature trying to file a noise complaint. But today, nothing. Just eerie, almost reverent quiet. You sit up, check your ears, wonder briefly if you've gone deaf or if perhaps the world ended while you slept. No such luck. The sky is still gray. Your mattress still smells faintly of mildew and yesterday's regrets. And your boots? Still damp. Always damp. You're starting to forget what dry feet feel like. Maybe they never existed. Maybe they're just a myth parents tell their children, like kindness, justice, or hot food. You step outside, and the village greets you with a sense of waiting. People are out and about, yes, but they're moving slower than usual, speaking in hushed tones, glancing over their shoulders like extras in a very tense play. You squint. You sniff the air. You wait for the apprentice to pop out from somewhere, perhaps covered in flour or on fire. Nothing. Then the church bell rings. 3 times. Slowly. With gravity. And that's when you remember, today is which day? Yes. Which day? The day where the village gets together to pretend it understands science by blaming all of its problems on women who know how herbs work. You sigh. Deeply. Because you know exactly where this is going. And sure enough, before you can even reach the mill, someone runs up to you. It's Marcy. The widow who always smells faintly of cabbage and passive aggression. It's the bread, she says breathlessly. The bread? Mill worker. It was too good. You stare. She stares back. There was rosemary in it, she hisses, as if this is damning evidence of satanic culinary influence. You consider lying, pretending you didn't receive the mysterious loaf, blaming it on the baker or the weather or possibly the goose from your dreams. But you're tired. You're always tired. So you just shrug and say, okay. Marcy gasps, as if you've just admitted to conjuring Beelzebub via sourdough starter. Within the hour, you are summoned to the village square. The entire council is there, which is to say, the priest, the mayor, who is also the butcher, and the miller, who was dragged into this because you work for him and because his face always looks vaguely guilty. The baker is also there, sweating profusely and holding a loaf of the exact same bread that mysteriously appeared on your doorstep. He looks at you like he's about to cry, or faint, or confess to something that happened 6 years ago and involves a goat. You're asked to explain yourself. You begin with, I didn't make the bread. There is silence. Then someone shouts, then who did? You say you don't know, that it was on your doorstep, that you just ate it. A gasp. Somewhere, someone drops a ladle. The priest narrows his eyes. You ate mysterious bread? You nod. It was warm. The silence becomes aggressive. The questioning continues. They ask if you've been consorting with herbalists. If you've seen any strange lights, if you've had unusual dreams. You pause. You think about the goose, the wheel, the flower river. You say, no. They don't believe you. You are dismissed but not absolved. They say they'll keep an eye on you. Which in this village means 3 old women will start loitering around your shack pretending to be interested in your laundry. When you finally make it to the mill, things are weird. The wheel is spinning backward. Your apprentice is standing inside the storeroom, staring at a pile of flour as if it just insulted his mother. And someone has left another loaf. This one has seeds in it. You sit down. You don't even bother asking questions anymore. You just cut a slice, chew slowly, and stare at the wheel turning the wrong direction. Maybe it's an omen. Maybe it's physics. Maybe the whole universe is just mocking you at this point. But the bread is good. Really good. That night, there's a knock on your door. It's not the priest. Not Marcy. Not even the baker. It's her. The herbalist. The one who lives just outside the village, in that hut with the vines growing over the roof and the reputation for mysterious female knowledge, which basically means she knows how to treat a fever and men find that threatening. She looks at you, eyes sharp, hands calloused, and says, you're welcome for the bread. You blink. She continues. You were being watched. So I made you something nice. That's all. You ask why. She shrugs. Because mill workers don't get anything nice. Ever. She's not wrong. Then she tosses a pouch of seeds into your hand and says, "Don't plant them unless you're ready for weird things to grow," and disappears into the dark like a well-moisturized cryptid. You stare at the seeds. You stare at the loaf. You stare at the stars, wondering how the hell your life turned into some kind of bread-based folktale. But in the morning, the council forgets all about you, because someone finds a chicken with 2 heads, and that becomes the new witch-related emergency. The wheel spins forward again. The apprentice drops a sack. The baker delivers a thank you bun and doesn't explain. Life returns to normal. Mostly. You keep the seeds in a jar. You don't plant them. Not yet. But you think about it. Late at night. When the dreams come back. When you're floating down the flower river and the goose is wearing a crown. Sleep well, mill worker. You're not just grinding grain anymore. You're grinding legend.